Welcome to the podcast. I'm Dr. Laurie Marbas, and today it's a very special day because now I'm also a physician, but I'm also a mother, and I'm going to be interviewing one of my three children, Jonathan Marbas. How are you, bud?
Good. How are you?
Good. So, Jonathan, the reason we're interviewing him today is because all three of the kids are plant based, but Jonathan has taken a special interest in that and he started his own podcast. That was his first interview. So honored. And he's also doing some really cool stuff. And I think it's important to understand that this is the new generation. This is a generation that will lead us to a healthier world. And it's exciting to see people who have an interest and spark in doing that. And Jonathan's kind of had a unusual journey, and I think it's important to share. And I just kind of show you the resilience of a young man who's really worked hard. So, Jonathan, so excited. Can you tell me, and the audience already know because I was there, tell us a little bit about why you're interested in health.
Well, to be frank, my love of health and fitness probably started when I was 12, when I watched those P90X videos. We used to have those, and it was like the beach body movement. And when I saw Tony, that was the name of the trainer. He was like nice and ripped and everything. I was growing up, I was very skinny. So uh, I looked up to him and I started doing P90X and running and cross country. And I was always conscientious about my diet even before I even started with P90X. And from there, it just kind of steamrolled into where in high school I was even more in love with health and fitness, where I've always wanted to go into that industry. And that love of fitness has stayed with me through high school, college. Right now, I'm still in college. And my goal in life is to continue pursuing a lifestyle, career, and personally that is involved in health and fitness.
So I think it's important that people understand. You said you were skinny when you were little. You were very, very thin. Tell us a little bit though, because Jonathan, I don't think you didn't have just a normal childhood. You had a difficult one, different even than your brother and sister, right? So those two, school came easy. Academic challenges were very simple for them. But you were blessed with dyslexia that we had to discover in a very drawn out and dramatic fashion. Just a little heads up. I mean, Jonathan may not remember this part, but when he was little, he would struggle to write letters. And his sister was writing at what, three, 2 or 3. I think she wrote her name at 2, and she was reading by 4 and writing little stories even. She's amazing.
She's
But
now in
then
medical school, just for everyone to know.
she's she's smarter than all of us combined. So let's just put it that way. But no, Jonathan's very super bright. But he's got the academics. I'm in the academic world, but you know, the thing was, when Jonathan came, the problem was he didn't even understand. He couldn't do the letters even as he got older, and he couldn't learn the ABCs, but he could do math like crazy. It was so bizarre. And normal conversations with this kiddo and some other interesting characteristics. But so we took him to therapists, we took him to doctors, we took him to psychologists, we had him tested. One even told me, I flew all the way to Dallas from Lubbock, Texas to take Jonathan there, and said he had the IQ of someone of 74. And I was like, that's ridiculous. So there's no way. And so I kept searching. And by the time Jonathan was in kindergarten, I don't know if you remember spending hours each day, because Jonathan spent 2 years in preschool, a pretty academically rigorous preschool at that.
Yeah, I remember looking at what they do is they try teaching you the syllables of words, and they don't teach you like real words at first. They teach you the sounds of the words. You know, if you have Jonathan, you learn John, then then. And so we broke down every single word, and it took years upon years to eventually learn how to read. And I didn't learn how to read until I was I would
Mm.
like to say seventh grade. So that I would have been
Well,
13, 14,
you
around that
had,
age.
well, let's go back in kindergarten, right? So you had, um, by the time we held you, actually, because you were going to be younger in that group anyway. So we actually held you from starting kindergarten another year because your birthday's in the end of April. So he was an older, not by a lot, but a little bit older kid. So we could keep you in preschool one more year till we tried to figure out what was going on. So kindergarten you started, right? So we worked every single day. Well, this is while I was in medical school too. We worked every single day for at least an hour on letters. I mean, hours upon hours of letters. We did all sorts of stuff, didn't we? And we were just trying to learn the alphabet. By the time we got to Christmas, he knew four letters, A, B, C, and D. And I was at my wit's end. I was like, I don't know what to do for this kid. And nobody had any answers for me until a friend of mine that was a pediatrician resident said, Laurie, why don't you look into dyslexia? That's what it sounds like. And I read the book called The Gift of Dyslexia, which I really understand now that entrepreneurs, 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic, even though they're only 10% of the population. And I was like reading about Jonathan. So Jonathan, do you remember the clay?
I do remember when I was in first grade, we had a special ed program at my school where we created letters from clay instead of just writing it down, because the thing with dyslexia, from what I have my understanding, is the occipital part of your brain doesn't have like a lot of connection with the rest of your brain. So you kind of have to use the different parts of your brain to create those connections with the letter. And so I associated that letter, like once I could feel it, I could connect with it. If that
It's
makes sense.
you're more the left side and the right side, they just work a little differently. So your linguistic part of your brain works a little differently from my understanding. But what we figured out was in kindergarten, we came home and we used those things that the practices in that Gift of Dyslexia book, and he took clay and you built letters and you learned 16 letters in 2 weeks over Christmas break. And so that was the breakthrough we needed, because then I could go to the school and say, listen, this kid's got dyslexia. And by law, you have to test him and you have to help me. So he did. And we were in Texas for a while. Then we went to Virginia, which was good. And we did everything we did. We did sight letters. We taped them on couch. It said couch or I mean, we did everything we could. Every single book that Jonathan found that was interesting, we bought that. If he was learning by film, we watched 24 hours of World War II history.
Yeah. I went through a history phrase, and that's never really left me in terms of having a obscure passion.
But by the time you were in first grade, no, by the time you were in fourth grade, you had a first grade reading level. So now to read fluently may have been in middle school, because it was in eighth grade that you finally didn't require any IP or special treatment or
It was
testing.
it was near seventh grade. I had a day where I just started like reading the newspaper, and I was like, whoa, I'm just putting these words together. All that practice, eventually it just clicked. And if you spend like a decade trying to learn a particular thing and it just starts clicking, you're like, what is this? Is this like me imagining things? And then after that, I became obsessed with reading, and I still love to read to this day.
Yeah, and you become an amazing writer. And so I would certainly say that you've overcome the dyslexia, but I think it taught you, one, the value of hard work and entrepreneurship, which you've known since you were little. So Jonathan, I don't remember, how what grade were you when you had me buy all those pencils and you sold them at school? Was that
I
first grade?
was in first grade and I wanted to make money. So I got my parents to buy me these Pokemon cards and pencils.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
I,
the Pokemon
I
cards.
used to sell that 3 times the price to my classmates. I might have not had the best grades, but I always had the most money. So yeah.
That's great. Well, the thing was, you kept coming back asking me more pencils. I'm like, my God, child, you're using a lot of pencils. And he's like, I was like, what do you think? He goes, Mom, I'm selling them, Mom. I'm like, okay, I see. I'm the bank.
Exactly.
So that was really funny. And then I think the most creative one is that was that in Virginia? You made those little maps of the school. You actually drew out
Oh
maps,
yeah.
copied them, and then sold the little maps to school.
Yeah, I made $50 selling kids maps at
Are you
school.
serious? I never knew you made that.
I was, I don't know why kids buy that, but it was I somehow convinced them to buy them. So it was, yeah.
So Jonathan went on to high school. So anyway, you can see where our life was filled with always some interesting story or something that Jonathan was doing. But either that or trying. He was very good at games with numbers, and he beat his siblings playing 21 or something that Lolo, his granddad, taught him how to play to gamble. Oh my goodness, this is getting too fun going down memory lane. But anyway, so Jonathan, you went into high school and then you're really what was really cool and I think is a great thing for parents to listen to if they have kids, one who are struggling with learning disabilities. One is to take each day small steps, right? And just keep working, keep chugging, make it
Mhm.
enjoyable, right? Some part that you find enjoyable, latch onto that. The second part was doing the things that you enjoy. So you always pushed yourself to be better and to step outside your comfort zone. So tell us what that meant, like one, what your leadership roles in school and the different things that you were doing there.
So in high school, I had this obsession of trying to build the greatest resume to get scholarships. And so I did everything under the sun in order to build the greatest resume I could. So I took 10 AP classes. I was president of my school. I was president of two other clubs at one point, and I was pushing myself very hard. But a good story that I feel people can take away from was in sophomore year of high school, or the beginning near the end of freshman year. I was running for a class position. It was class president, and this guy named Ethan, I won't say his last name, but Ethan and me were competing for class presidency, and I had spent around $80 to $100 buying everyone bags of candy. And I was like, hey, here's a bag of candy, vote for me. And so I gave it to everyone in my class, and they were like, we're all going to vote for you. Mazel tov. And it came to presenting our speech. I written out this like speech, and I went first, and it was horrible. I was stuttering on every word, and I was sounded like a robot. And Ethan goes up there. He had done 4-H and had been public speaking for at least a few years, and he destroyed me, absolutely destroyed me. He was funny. He was spontaneous. He was able to engage with the crowd and just absolutely annihilated me. And I didn't get a single vote. Like, that was how bad it was. Everyone was, yeah, everyone was like, you suck. So luckily I was able to interview for a class position, the student body government was based off interview, not popular vote. And luckily I was able to get into student government through the interview process. But what I could have chosen was I could have been angry and very PO'd at Ethan for destroying me. But instead, when he was destroying me at the time, I was like, whoa, he's really good. I'm going to study him. And I literally spent, I think, months watching YouTube videos on how to be a better public speaker. And then throughout high school, from sophomore year to when I graduated, I had to give speeches to the class every single week. And then I also went to different clubs, and I was always trying to become a better public speaker. And I spent 2 years at Carl Mesa University, and I also was public speaking in front of them. And I've now gone to the point where I had, for instance, a class where I had to speak in front of everyone, and I didn't even prepare, and I just gave a killer speech, and my professor was like, you are literally one of the best speakers I've ever had in my 20 years of teaching. I don't know how you can just like look at your PowerPoint and then just come up with something right off the fly. And that was only because I had spent 5 years working at it. But I became a very good public speaker probably within 3 years, because I gave a public speech on graduation, because I became third. I was like historian, and that they actually wrote an article about that in our county's newspaper. And so coming from somebody who was a horrible public speaker to somebody who became an excellent public speaker, I think, things happen for us, not against us. So when you fail, just fail forward instead of just looking down. And that's just one little aspect. And when it comes to academics, I could not write or read to save my life when I was entering high school. I could read, but I didn't know how to write. And because of just constantly, like, I would spend, and every day I would write a 4-paragraph essay. And I did that for like an entire year in order to become a better writer. And now I can write really pretty decent. And the same thing with like communication and understanding people. Like I was very socially awkward growing up. You can attest to that, right?
Yes, Jonathan.
Very.
So Jonathan would have moments that he wouldn't read social cues, right? And we just assume as part of the dyslexia and different things. But his brother and sister who flanked him, the younger and older brother and myself, were like, Jonathan, social cues. And so we would teach him, and he was always super absorbent of those. Now, it doesn't mean that you didn't struggle, Jonathan, right? Because you had some down times when you're you felt down.
We all do. We all have,
of course,
down times.
But the thing was that you were always open to suggestions, and you took them in knowing that we loved you and meant well for you, and you took those and worked really hard because you understood the value of hard work, right? So if you work harder than the person who has all the talent and they just don't work as hard, you're going to gain, right? Because I think that's the point that you're making here, is that one, you worked really hard because you didn't have the innate skills, but that's actually proven to be beneficial to you when it comes to launching your own business, your own podcast, becoming an entrepreneur, your business major now, that type of thing. So that's the thing to look for.
Exactly. I mean, if you knew where I started, I was not athletic. I was very skinny. I weighed 100 pounds entering into high school, roughly at the same height that I am now. And
you weren't that tall. You were about,
I was 5.
You were shorter than me when you entered high school. I'm 5'7". You're 5'9" now.
But still, I did gain 50 pounds in weight just because I just ate a lot of food and worked extremely hard.
But you were probably about 5'4"-ish, gained about 5 inches. Yeah. So, but yeah, you were definitely very thin, and you were bullied growing up too, right? Because we were in different schools. We were active duty. We were in public schools. And I think there was a point where you're like, I don't want to be bullied anymore. And that's when you really started getting into lifting weights.
Yeah. That's probably where it stems from. And it just, you work hard. And I haven't fully overcome dyslexia until I believe probably until I left Colorado and back in 2017. I don't feel like I had gotten fully over it academically, socially, and physically. It took probably until I was 19, 20, honestly.
What do you mean that you got over it?
More socially, like social cues and your EQ, like understanding EQ, probably.
So explain to us what EQ is for those who don't understand that.
EQ is emotional intelligence. So the ability to empathize with people, the ability to, if you go into a room and be able to relate and have a understanding of what is social awkward, what's not. And it took a long time for me to like dissect that. And kind of what I did with like academia, I read a lot of books and I just saw and observed people who were very, had high emotional intelligence, and people just loved to be around them. And so I just watched them, see what they did, what they didn't do. And I just kind of emulated them. You surround yourself with the people who...
You were studying people. So exactly. You were a studier of people and seeing what they did because they had the traits and qualities that you desired. So that is really unique because a lot of kids are not into that. They're so worried about their own personal agenda and how people see them. But you're just like, shoot, someone's already got it. I'm going to watch what they're doing. I'm going to shut court, make a shortcut here and figure that out. But let's talk about the plant-based diet. So tell us what you first thought when we be kind. When we get down When I brought it home, that was early 2012. So you were what, 15?
Yeah, I was 15.
Yeah, you're about 15, so you're 22 now. So that was 15. And tell us what happened when mom's like, we're not eating meat and dairy anymore.
I was against it to the beginning. It took maybe about a few months, and I kind of started seeing your way. And it wasn't like overnight; it was a transition for sure. But it was relatively easy because I had always been a health nut. I mean, I don't think I've had cake for my own birthday for
Yeah, it
years
was so
now.
weird. We could never buy you a cake for your birthday because you wouldn't eat it. You literally
Yeah,
refused.
I never really I never puke. I would never puke, but it was like I don't want cake for my birthday since middle school or even high, like elementary
Um,
maybe.
it must have been in middle school. I do know that we had to use jelly beans to potty train you. So there was
Yeah,
a point that you did like sweets because
yeah, but I
there
haven't
was,
had cake for my own birthday in
yeah, you were
years.
really like sweets. Like you couldn't buy anything sugary for you. You're just like, I don't want it. I won't eat it. And I'm like, this is so strange.
Yeah, so I've always been kind of health conscious. So relatively speaking, going to a vegan diet wasn't too difficult for me. And I've never drank, I've never done any sort of like smoking or drugs. And being in college, I don't really care what people's opinions are of me. So I just always, I guess it's just easier for me because I just have always been an individual,
Well,
you know?
I think part of it is, right, that you set yourself some goals, right? And then you just observing as being your mom, right, is just that you have a certain goal and every decision that you make, if it hinders your reaching your goal, you won't do it. But if it will add to your ability or increase your odds of succeeding there, that's what you're going to do. And I think that has only steamrolled in the last 2 years, I would say, since you're in Florida going to school.
I would say so. Yes. I think I had some bit of that. Lost it probably first 2 years of college. And then it started like coming back again as I've focused more on what I see for myself and my future.
So, as a young person who's 22, who's healthy, wants to focus on plant-based nutrition, what is it exactly that you see in your future? Like, what type of company are you wanting to run? Like, where do you see the need, and what can maybe you might encourage some other young people who are listening that might be thinking about doing something like this?
For me, I am positioning myself to get in the more of the food business. There's a few different things that I'm working on there. And as time goes on, I'll further elaborate. But when it comes to people who are my age and you want to make a difference, I say find something that you're passionate about and something that you're great at. If it's health and fitness, then it's health and fitness. If it's it just depends on whatever you're good at. If you're good at it and you have a passion for it, then you can make a living out of it. And um, don't just chase the money because you'll never be happy. I mean,
So,
there's a
What do you think will make someone happy? I'd like to hear this from a 22-year-old.
well, I have limited experience in that, but from just kind of like observation, just doing things that have a higher purpose than yourself. And I think giving back to people, the people who give the most typically are the most fulfilled, I've kind of seen. And, at the end of the day, you only live one time. And if you live with intent and you just don't live life willy nilly and you're like, I don't know where I'm going, but I feel like I'll eventually get somewhere. If you versus I am going to be at this place in XYZ years and I'm doing this every single day that will get me to that place, that seems more fulfilling than the person who's just kind of like lets life, have their
Blow
way.
them around. So, you're kind of like you set your sailboat and you just kind of set your sails and which way the wind blows, it'll take
Yeah.
you.
And
That's not going to lead you down a path of where you want to be. You may land somewhere that you find enjoyable, but don't be dismayed when you are still circling in the same pattern and nothing's changed, right?
exactly. And you should have you should have somewhere that you're working towards, but you should also enjoy the journey. like I enjoy the journey. I love every single day that I get up and I get to do things and work towards a future that I enjoy. But I enjoy the climb. I I like the destination, but I also like the climb. And I think you have to enjoy the climb because at the end of the day, that's all we really have.
Because you're only given this day, right? The day that you
Exactly.
have right now.
Exactly. You don't know. I could get hit by a bus today or tomorrow. You never know. So
There'll
I
be
just
none of
enjoy.
that. Right. You enjoy the journey because your journey may end tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, I think people need to understand the type of kid that you are. So I remember when you were in high school and um, Dr. Coleman came up to me, goes, "That was really cool what Jonathan did." I said, "What did Jonathan do?" Because now Dr. Coleman was a colleague of mine in Rifle, Colorado, went to hospital, but we lived in a little town called Parachute. And his son was the same age as Jonathan's, Ben. And Dr. Coleman came up to me during work day and said that was really cool what Jonathan did. And I had no idea what Jonathan had done. And he goes, he gave that computer to that girl that didn't have one. I said, he did? So I came home and I was like, Jonathan, what was this computer that you gave away? He goes, well, I won it. I just gave it to a girl who didn't have one because I already have everything I need. And I think that, Jonathan does those type of things often. And he's just a really good kid in that sense. Young man, excuse me. You'll always be my kid. But I think it speaks volumes of what you were describing, right? Someone who often gives and is going to be more fulfilled and because that's part of why we're here in our human existence, right, is to fill others' lives up, because then we also get benefit from that. So I think that's important. So now, Jonathan, you started your podcast. What is your aim for your podcast?
To share the world the truth about like the vegan diet and that people are reversing their chronic diseases by this, and this is the healthiest diet that there is. And that's always been my passion, is helping people. Business and stuff. I love business and everything and entrepreneurship, but that's the end, like that's the means to the end of helping people. That me helping people is what I love. And I love just making people healthy. And at one time I wanted to be like in the medical field, but realized that's not necessarily my strongest point. And so I kind of realigned I took a self-check and kind of had realization that my skills and talents lead more towards business. And so and also just being able to communicate with people. And with the podcast, I want to, again, just share stories of people who come from a vegan background and to inspire people to change their lives. They can lose their weight and they can overcome chronic diseases. So
I think that's important too, because you brought out a couple of points that's super important. One, you hear people reverse disease, but there's other benefits. Animal agriculture is cruel, and that's a whole nother realm of vegan ethics. But your environment, right? So this is a world that your generation is going to be inheriting. You probably want to make the decisions that are going to ensure the best place environment for you and your children to live and sustain a viable future. But I want to go back to where you describe you and your health, and you're seeing that people are getting better. Tell people, John, because you're a pretty well-built young man, like you're lifting weights. And if I recall exactly, I remember the last 2 years of high school, you gained about 30 pounds of lean muscle just from on a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
And so for people to understand, clean, no drugs involved, but granted he was a growing teenager, but that's just, again, dedication to a sport where you were lifting weights. And it was so funny because, Jonathan, you ran cross country all those years, and you went from the skinny cross country kid to, you were like, there were two of you guys, right? That every time when we go to a cross country meet and we were in Colorado, and there's Jonathan, he's like bulging out of his little uniform. I was like, he's got more muscles than 6 of these kids together. But I think that's important to understand, that you can thrive, right, as an athlete and building muscle. And this isn't, a diet that makes you weak and anemic or, anything, right? What would you say as far as your own health, like your recovery? Do you feel strong? Do you feel energetic? How do
Yeah,
you feel as a person?
absolutely. I feel energetic. I gain weight. I mean, there's plenty of vegan bodybuilders out there that have dispelled the myth. There's John Venus, a vegan bodybuilder. He's fully vegan. He's pretty big dude.
Who was
There's
he? Sorry, you cut
John
out.
Venus. John
John.
Venus.
Okay.
There's his name's Niam. It's like Niami. I can't pronounce his name, but he's also a vegan. There's plenty of vegan bodybuilders out there, and
Well, and
the
there's Patrick Boboyan, who's one of the strongest men in the world, who's vegan.
Mhm.
So I think that's important for any young person, especially young males. And there's a new movie come out. You haven't seen it yet, but your brother did, called Game Changers. Hopefully, it'll be more available more to the general public soon. But that's really cool. But it talks about elite athletes who eat a plant-based diet. So, what what advice do you give to someone, Jonathan, who is saying, "Well, I don't even know what to eat." So tell us what you eat in a day.
Well, I eat pretty boring. I eat a bowl of big old oats. I
And we're
smash
talking a
bananas.
very, very big bowl. This is not your normal bowl of
I
oatmeal.
eat, well, if you want like to be specific, I eat like 300 grams of oats with half a liter of soy milk with like 3 bananas, which is between like 200 and 300 grams. And then if you have tofu, I eat 2 blocks tofu a day with, I think like 100 grams of spinach, and I eat like a bag of blueberries. But the biggest things, like when it comes to like gaining weight, I would say like beans, rice, and tofu. Those are your big ones, and also nuts.
So you're eating beans, rice, tofu, nuts and seeds, greens, fruit, pretty plain. You don't, but although you make your own, you have some cool videos on making your own like black bean brownies and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um, so, but there's certainly you eat a pretty simplified diet because I know you how much do you spend a week? Less than $100,
Less than
probably
100.
50 to 75 a week ish on average.
Yeah,
Maybe
and
$100 every 10 days or so, 12 days.
exactly somewhere around there.
So it's pretty reasonably priced. You can eat, and you're eating a lot of food because you're trying to bulk.
Yeah, so I'm eating between 3,000 and 3,500 calories a day. But that's if you're just trying to maintain a weight, you don't have to eat nearly as much as I do.
Right, because I probably eat less than half of what you're eating on a day. So definitely, definitely. So you're starting your podcast, and it's called
This is plant-based.
This is Plant-Based, and you have a website.
Yes. And it's called This is Plant-based too.
Thisisplantbased.com, which I'll put the links and everything here. And then, so what are there are more, you're finishing school in December of next year, and you're wanting to get more into health and fitness in the food industry, maybe, and a
Hmm.
few different things. So now what advice do you tell these college kids? Because there's always excuses. I can't do this because I'm a college kid. I can't eat healthy. Why do you think it's important to eat healthy as a young person?
Well, it's establishing good habits later on in life because even if you can, for instance, your 20s, you can kind of like you can choose to eat healthy or unhealthy, but those habits that you establish now, this thing long term, will follow you when you get into your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and it's a lot harder to change habits when you're in your 30s because that's an extra decade of ingraining that habit in. If you do it now when you are in your early 20s or even late teens, it makes it a world of a difference. It's for instance, I don't have to deal with the habit of drinking alcohol, and I don't have to deal with that habit. But if you get in the habit of eating really bad and drinking a lot, that habit can follow you later on in life when you're metabolism decreases, and then you have, the beer gut and diabetes and a whole host of chronic diseases.
Right. So I think you said exactly right. These are habits that you're starting. So that's why I tell parents to start feeding their children well. They're like, well, they won't eat it. I said, they'll eat what you feed them. Do you remember the rule we always had at home? It's like you'll either eat what's in front of you or you'll eat in the morning, because I wasn't going to cook 2 meals.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you always wash your dishes. Like I'm not your maid. If you dirty a dish, you wash it. Because again, one, we didn't have the money, or two, I didn't have the time to be everybody's housemaid, nor was it smart. But those are key factors, right? Is that you're
Mm-hmm.
exactly right. So those habits look at your habits that you built when you were little studying, led you to success in high school, graduating third
Mm-hmm.
in his class, and then on to college with a full ride scholarship, and moving on to Florida and some other things. But you're switching majors just because I think you found out who you were, right? You weren't denying yourself anymore of the things that you enjoyed, which are always entrepreneurship and business, and now to success, hopefully into your 20s, 30s, and on. So
Exactly.
that is really important. So how for you, I think it's always been easy for you to establish good habits. So how do you help? Have you helped any? How would you give advice to help someone to, let's say, establish a workout habit? Because I know you're very strict about that.
Just do one thing a day that leads that create a power list. So write 3 to 5 things that you want to get to make habits, and try doing them every single day. Maybe even just start with one thing, like one good habit you want to form in 30 days, and create a little list and then mark it off. And you do it every single day for a month. You add something new, take that thing that you now made a habit, get it off the list, and you add something. And you continue doing that little by little and little. And over time, those habits build up and will, within like a year, you'll be a different person altogether. I mean, I started doing that probably the beginning of 2017, and it's changed my life. There's little habits. It could be as little as I'm not going to drink that extra soda that I drink every single day. And you do that for a month, and then you take something else. And then, before you know it, those little habits start adding up, because people, you can do like the 90-day weight loss program. You lose a lot of weight quickly, but then you don't have sustained effort towards it, and you gain all that weight back within 30 days. So you've spent 90 days losing all that weight, but then you just gain it back within 30 or somewhere around there. So biggest thing is just think longevity, and change doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take months, maybe years, but in the long run, over the span of your life, which is decades, it'll be worth it.
So those small habits create ripple effects and they build upon each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I like just the one thing. So focus on the one thing that you can do every day. And what you're describing is what they call a habit tracker. So when let's say you put it on a calendar, right? And you're clicking an X. I did it this day, this day, this day, this day. And it's a visual motivation that you're seeing. And like there was a story of a gentleman who he was young, like you, starting out right out of college at a sales company, not making much. And he was, just a newbie, but he had 120 paper clips in one jar, and he would not stop or leave for the day until he had moved all the paper clips to the other jar. And each one of those were associated with making a sales call. And before you know it, he's bringing in, like, within, I think, 24 months or something, I can't remember the exact story, but it was a short period of time, $5 million in sales, and he went on to do very well. But it's just those small habits, right, that you're doing, and those visual cues too help. So excellent.
That helps a lot.
Yep. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience who might be wanting to listen, one besides come and subscribe? Because you have some cool people coming on.
Yes. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Jonathan Marbas _. And if you want to follow me on YouTube, it's Jonathan Marbas. And if you want to follow me on any Google Play Stitcher, or iTunes. It's This Is Plant Based with Jonathan Marbas. Those are all the areas that you can find me. You can also visit my website called thisisplantbased.com.
Very cool. And thank you, Jonathan, for being on my podcast.
Thank you.
All right. Enjoy, everyone, and go follow my Jonathan, because I think you guys are it'll be fun for you to see what the young people are going to be doing in this world. You guys, take care.